Everyone have a good lunch? All right, we're gonna have fun today. I've got some material I'm gonna present to give everyone a high-level overview of influencer marketing from a brand perspective, and then we're gonna have tons of time to get into questions, whatever you wanna know. All right. So in 1903, decades before computers and before even typewriters, the preferred method of communication was the fountain pen. The predecessor to today's ballpoint pens, the fountain pen was elegant, beautiful, and it was prone to extreme messiness. Those who used such instruments were clearly and literally marked. It was in that year that the Conklin Pen Company in Toledo, Ohio, decided to employ influencer marketing. But of course, it wasn't called that back then. Influencer marketing is a relatively recent term. Throughout the 20th century, brands and marketing agencies used celebrities to serve as spokespeople and endorsers for brands. In the early 1900s, most celebrity influencers were professional athletes. But Conklin knew better than to use just any old athlete to be an influencer for them. Conklin knew that if they wanted to sell fountain pens to everyday folks, they needed somebody that an everyday folk would relate to, someone with whom it would make sense to tie to the brand. Imagine if Conklin in 1903 had hired Major League Baseball player Babe Ruth as their spokesman. I mean, other than signing fat contracts, Babe wasn't exactly known for his prolific use of the quiet quill. So that's our first lesson in criteria when it comes to influencer marketing, brand fit. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's review some preliminary concepts. Put simply, influencer marketing is any time a brand is able to leverage someone else who has an audience of their own to exert some influence over that audience, which means anyone with an audience is an influencer. Influence is not limited to mega celebrities with millions of social media followers. A prominent member of your community is an influencer and potentially a powerful influencer for the right brand. So we therefore break influencers down into a number of categories. Now this is based largely on social media following, and you can scale this up or down as you need to for your particular industry. But at the top, we have mega influencers, typically with over 1 million social media followers. And just like the endorsers of the early 1900s, you're going to have mostly celebrities, movie stars, athletes, musicians, and so on in that category. With a mega influencer, you can expect to reach a huge audience across a wide swath of demographics, but you're going to pay a lot, of course, for that. Down a tier, we have the macro influencer with their 100,000 to 1 million fans. Again, that's on average typical. These are almost even US numbers, so that might be varying a little bit here. You'll, of course, find celebrities, your share of celebrities in that macro influencer category, but you'll also begin to find influencers at this level who've focused in a particular niche, like travel or food, making it a bit easier to work with someone at that level. Down a tier is the micro-influencer with their 1,000 to roughly 100,000 followers, though it could be argued that somebody with 100,000 social media fans might exert a great deal of influence, particularly if they've really honed their focus and their niche on a particular topic. Now, unless they're really focused on a geographic region, it's at this level that it begins to be a bit harder to both find and work with influencers. Everyone knows who the mega celebrities are, and they have experienced staff to handle campaign requests. Joe the vlogger may have never worked with a brand before, so we have to be prepared for that if we're working with influencers as a brand. And finally, at the nano influencer level, we have individuals with typically less than 1,000 social media followers. These may be people who really don't use social media much at all. They might be active in their community. But yet again, for the right business, they might be the best influencer. So, while I would love to just assume that you're all here because you know you want to use influencer marketing and you're just wanting to find out how to go about it the best way, maybe that's not you. Maybe you've heard some of the horror stories in the news of influencers acting like divas or padding their stats with fake followers, and you're thinking, Mike, maybe that's not for me. Maybe old school sales is the way to go. Except your customers today, they're not as interested in talking to salespeople, but they do listen to influencers. And a brand that takes the time to nurture and scale and grow an influencer marketing program has the opportunity to reach new audiences, scale content creation, and establish more trust with their target audience. And it's that trust that's going to determine whether they buy from you or from someone else. So if you want to be top of mind and tip of tongue, influencer marketing is an exceptionally effective means to that end. But if you're looking at the agenda, you saw that today's session was supposed to be about brand ambassador programs, right? So what's the difference between a brand ambassador and an influencer? Well, simply put, a brand ambassador is an influencer who goes beyond paid marketing campaigns. There's someone with whom there's a relationship there, and there's an ongoing level of activity. Somebody that Ken Blanchard, the author and doctor, might refer to as a raving fan. They're an active user or customer of your products or services. And because there's an ongoing level of activity there, we need a formal program in place to manage that. So now we get into the meat of the presentation part of this session. How do we actually build that kind of a program? And before I get into all the details, I should point out that everything I'm about to tell you could be managed by a CMO or a social media manager or head of marketing in your organization or yourself. You don't necessarily need to hire somebody to run this program. You will need to spend a little time up front, though, getting things started. First, make sure that everybody in your organization is on the same page in terms of goals and expectations for your influencer marketing. There is a lot that influencers can do for us, from brand awareness to sales, but they're not miracle workers, so have that conversation. The second thing that you're going to want to think about, just as a Major League Baseball player probably makes for a lousy fountain pen spokesman, so too will most influencers be a poor match for you and your brand. You need to consider brand fit as the first criteria before proceeding with any individual influencer. So what does that mean? Well, brand fit is the degree to which an individual influencer's voice, style, message, content focus align with that of the representing brands. In other words, how alike is the influencer and the brand? It helps if you've already thought about your own brand in terms of style, voice, message, and so on. Perhaps you have a polished style guide that has the aesthetics, like your logo treatment, your fonts, your colors, but you've also thought about your voice, your culture, your message as a brand. Because if you've got that polished style guide in place, determination of brand fit becomes a lot easier. The second criteria you need to consider is the category of influencer that you want to work with, i.e. mega influencer, and your available budget. So once you have those two things in mind, it's time to start looking for influencers. And there are a number of ways that we're going to go about finding potential influencers for your team. The first is to think about the people who are already talking about your brand. These will likely be customers, bloggers, other experts in your industry. The benefit here is they will be top of mind. You want to do a lot of research to come up with this particular list. They will already have content about your industry and your brand. They're already fans of your brand. They're talking about you in a positive way. They've got a track record that you can evaluate. It's also likely that people in this category are probably micro or even nano influencers, which means they're also more affordable. The other option to think about is the known names in your industry, the macro influencers in whatever industry you're in. These would be people who are speaking at industry events like I am here, right? Or creating content in and about your industry. And again, the benefit here is you will already know who these people are. They will be top of mind. You won't have to research them. You're probably already following them on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. But that suggests a third approach, and the one that you're going to have to take regardless, and that is research. Researching influencers will take time, but it's also going to be extremely rewarding. When you're researching new potential influencers in your industry, you will find people that you never previously heard of before, and yet they will make outstanding influencers and ambassadors for your brand. So how do we go about this? Well, the first tool that I'm going to recommend to you It's called BuzzSumo. With BuzzSumo, you can scour the web, as well as Facebook and Twitter specifically, and identify the most prolific authors in your industry. BuzzSumo will show you all the content that they've created on social media or on their blogs or other websites, and you can drill down into each one of those articles and just make a determination, would it have made sense to include my brand or products in that article? If so, you found a potential influencer. Make note of them and continue to your research. Now, as I'm making note of my influencers, I tend to put them either in a Google Sheet, or I use a tool like Nimble or HubSpot to begin to keep track of them, because we want to be able to look at all the influencers that we're reaching out to. We want to be able to track the activity that we're having with them. And Google Sheets, if you're getting into hundreds or thousands of influencers, that becomes a little weighty to use. One of the really cool benefits with Nimble is if you're using BuzzSumo to identify influencers, BuzzSumo will tell you their Twitter profile, which you can click on, and then if you've got Nimble, you can use Nimble's Chrome extension to import that influencer into Nimble. You can tag them as an influencer and return to your research. Nimble will then scour the web and find for you all their contact information, all their social profiles, all their websites. We're going to want to keep doing that search, and I'll get into why in a little bit, but as you're going through there, keep tagging those researchers, keep tagging those influencers, putting them into Nimble, but you're also going to want to begin to listen to conversations that are happening online, certainly about your brand, but also about your industry, because again, these are going to be potential influencers who are having those conversations, which means there's a third tool we want to add to the mix, and that's Agorapulse. This is who I work for. It's a social media management tool. You can, of course, publish to Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Google My Business, TikTok, YouTube, and get reports and monitor all those things for comments. But more importantly, you can set up powerful searches on specific hashtags, even specific influencers. You can do what's called geofencing and say, I only want to see the content within a specific mile or kilometer radius, filter by keywords, by language, and more. So you can begin to surface potential influencers straight off of social media at that point. It's worth repeating at this point that influencer marketing is all about relationships. You're going to hear me use that word over and over and over again. It is possible to be transactional with an influencer and fill out a form and pay him to send a tweet, but that is not effective. Truly effective influencer marketing happens when there's a relationship there. The influencer genuinely likes and wants to work with you, and you genuinely like and want to support that influencer. But the thing is, relationships take time. I don't want to suggest there are no shortcuts to building a great relationship, because I'm about to share a bunch with you, but none of it matters if you're not able to build rapport with each individual one at a time. I'm stressing this now because as you start using some of those other tools and start surfacing a few potential influencers, you might be tempted to just rush into that courtship phase with those couple of influencers and try to develop them really quickly. The problem is that with any relationship, we do not know in advance how it's going to go. These are essentially blind dates. Some of the influencers you reach out to today might be eager to work with you. Others, maybe not so much. And we just don't know in advance how that's going to go. So take the time now to build a list through your research of 25 to 50 potential influencers if you can, and then get to work sparking all of those relationships. Did I mention relationships take a long time? I did? Cool. But the good news is, if you take this time now, the odds of you creating a successful, beneficial, positive relationship in a shorter amount of time increase dramatically. So what's the next step? The first thing we're going to want to do is begin to connect with all of those influencers that we've identified. Simply take a look at their social profiles and make a determination. Which one is their preferred? Which one is their most active? Is it their Facebook profile, their group, their LinkedIn profile, their Twitter, their TikTok, whatever it is? And make note, because depending on the network, some of the connections are one way and some of them are two way. Meaning, one of you has to initiate the connection request, and the other person has to approve it. And I'm making that distinction right now because if you try to connect with an influencer and they don't know you, they're not going to be inclined to approve that connection. It'll be much easier to simply follow them on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok, if that's an option. If the network is one where that connection has to be approved, like a personal Facebook profile or a personal LinkedIn profile, it might be possible to follow their public posts if they've allowed it, or simply bookmark their profile and visit it regularly. If it's a nano influencer, someone who maybe isn't very active on social media, maybe they're a president or a leader of a local community or a group, perhaps you could have somebody introduce you and get to know them that way. Once we've connected with all of our influencers, it's time to start engaging with them. That means engaging with their social media posts. Now, specifically what you will do will vary depending on the post and what they've written and what you want to talk about at a particular moment. But virtually all the social media posts allow you to like, comment on, or share each individual post. I'm going to give you some helpful guidelines in terms of how you can engage with them. The first rule is engage with no more than one post per influencer per day on average. Shares are the most meaningful form of engagement. You're saying, I trust you and your content enough to show it with my audience, right? Comments are where we're able to have discussions and conversations and demonstrate similarities in thought between us and the influencer. This is where you develop rapport. Likes and all those other similar reactions are nice for staying top of mind, but they're not very meaningful, okay? You may like, comment on, and share an individual post from an influencer, but be wary of doing that too often or of just liking every single thing that they publish. Some might see you as a raving fan, and others they're just going to think you're raving. So let's not do that, okay? Instead, you're going to want to spend just 30 to 60 minutes or less per day engaging with your target influencers in whatever way it makes sense to do so. Because in that process, you are, of course, building up that relationship. You're building rapport with each individual influencer, but you're also observing, and that is the third criteria, audience engagement. By personally engaging with each one of those individual influencers' posts, you're making that observation of how those posts are performing, what that engagement is like. Now, I'll give you some examples. Are you the only one commenting on their posts? Or is it the same people every single time? Or is it a nice and diverse mixture of different people commenting and engaging with each individual post? What's the conversation like? Is the influencer ignoring you and everyone else, or are they taking the time to respond to each and every comment and keeping their audience interested and engaged? What's the tone and the style of their replies? If the influencer was responding to a comment as you or your brand, how would you feel about that response? Because if we take the time to think about and observe how they are engaging with their audience, we will be beginning to understand their perspectives on business and other aspects of life that are important to us and our target audience. We will come to understand their worldview, and that will help us relate to that individual. Now, once they have replied and there's been some nice positive back and forth and some conversation between you and that individual influencer, it will be time to take that relationship to the next level, and that is collaboration. So at AgoraPulse, I'm responsible for all of our influencers. I'm our head of strategic partnerships. I'm responsible for our influencers, our ambassadors, and our brand partnerships. I'm the relationship guy at AgoraPulse, which is just about the best job in the world. But my approach is to identify social media managers, social media marketing influencers, and simply gift them free access to our tool and see if they use it. I can tell if they log in. I can see and hear if they're talking about our brand, my brand, online. And if they do, I can amplify their message. I can send them swag and invite them to events. Anytime I want to do a Facebook Live video or host a webinar, I have no shortage of social media marketing experts from around the world in various degrees that I can tap to be a guest expert. In fact, every quarter, I run a massive virtual event. It's like this conference, right? Only it's 100% online. Last quarter's event had 50 speakers, 40 brand partners. We had over 2,000 attendees, all online, all from around the world. And those speakers were powered by the influencers and the brand relationships that I've developed over time. That's the kind of approach that many of you could take. Live videos, webinars, roundup posts. These are marketing activities where everybody benefits. You get an expert. You get to share that expertise with your target audience. That guest expert gets to look good. I make my guests look really good. I make my events all about them. They're the keynote speakers. I don't even speak at my own events. They're the ones that's shining, and then I reward them with VIP dinners and that sort of thing. So if that's an option for you, that's something you could do over and over and over again. The next step will be some kind of paid campaign. Now what that looks like will of course vary depending on your business, your goals, the kind of campaign that you want to run, the time of year perhaps, the seasonality, and of course the influencer that you want to work with. Someone here may want to fork out millions of dollars to have a mega celebrity send out a tweet on their behalf, but I would recommend instead looking for more long-lasting and more affordable campaigns and activities, such as having them write a blog post about your brand or services or culture or something important to you. Participate in a Facebook Live video like I mentioned. Write a review about your brand or products. Ask them to talk about your brand in their newsletter to their audience. Generally, I recommend when you're doing that initial influencer research, make note of what each individual influencer tends to do best or tends to prefer to create their content. For instance, if I wanted to do an Instagram campaign, I would work with Jen Herman, which was that gal on the bottom right there, and she's famous for Instagram. She's written Instagram for Dummies and Instagram for Business for Dummies. She's a famous Instagram influencer. I would come up with a topic that was interesting to her, relevant to her audience and my brand, and we'd come up with a series of Instagram stories and reels. That's how we would go about doing it. What's important is that however you design this campaign, it should hit as many of these aspects as possible. It should be long enough so that there's an opportunity to actually expose your brand or your products or your services to their audience, but also short enough to limit risk and initial investment. It's got to educate them on who you are, what you stand for, what you do, but it's also got to entertain to keep them engaged. And it should result in reusable assets, which can be repurposed over and over and over again. I'll give you an example. Let's suppose you want to work with a micro-influencer to introduce your brand or products to their audience. So you come up with a topic that is really interesting, something that's going to resonate with that influencer and their audience, maybe something they've talked about in the past, but maybe it's been a little while. You identify some articles, yours or other people's, that talk about that particular topic. Come up with, make sure you've got your brand handles mentioned in their posts, maybe have some hashtags that are determined, industry hashtags, brand hashtags, and so on. And you have a series of posts outlined that they're going to share over time, and you culminate the entire campaign at the end with a Facebook Live interview where they talk about this topic and you interview them. At the end of that campaign, you will have reached a sizable portion of their audience. You will have driven traffic back to your web properties, to those articles. You will have increased your social media followers, and you will have ended with a Facebook Live interview, which means you've got a piece of video content that can now be repurposed in any number of ways. When it comes to compensation, brands have a lot of options, starting with free. Many influencers are happy and excited to work with brands that they know and love, and they'll do it for free. Many retail brands are able to work with micro and nano influencers by simply offering a discount on their products. Trust me, I have 2 little girls. My wife buys boutique dresses for these girls. And these brands get her to pay for the dresses, and my wife shares them to Instagram, promotes the brand, tags the brand in every post, and they're beautiful pictures. And she had to pay for that. They gave her a 10, 15% discount. It works every time. What you can also do is make sure that however you're approaching any influencer, you're simply weighing the benefits that you expect to receive with those that you expect to pay out. Have that in balance. And have some sense of what it is that you can offer before you go into the conversation. So what does that mean? Well, like I said, you can offer free products or services, maybe not everybody in the room. And some of you can offer free products, services, access. Maybe you can offer upgraded products or services. You might be able to offer behind the scenes access to point people in the company. For the right influencer, being able to interview a CEO or somebody who's prominent in the community, that's worth a lot to them. You may be also able to offer them swag, corporate gifts. On the monetary side, you can offer them affiliate commissions, increased affiliate commissions, one-time payments, or ongoing payments. Make sure that however you decide to proceed from a compensatory perspective, that you're constantly measuring and reevaluating the program, at least monthly or quarterly. Don't just assume that it's working. And it's also helpful to have those meetings and conversations with the influencers themselves. What are they enjoying? What are they taking out of it? What are you doing well? What aren't you doing so well? How can you help them be a more vocal advocate for your brand? And remember the truth of influencer marketing, which is that it really boils down to brand awareness. And that's not something that can simply be measured. Any activity on the part of the influencer is going to be helpful to the brand and interesting to your audience. Which brings us to the final topic that I want to cover in the slides, which is success. Earlier, I mentioned the Conklin Pen Company, right? In 1903, they wanted to find an influencer to espouse the use of their fountain pens. Who do you think they might have gone with in the early 1900s? Somebody that fits all the criteria we've talked about above. None other than Mark Twain. Who here knows who Mark Twain is, right? Yeah. Author of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, Adventures of Tom Sawyer, Life on the Mississippi, and a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. He was also known throughout the United States as somebody who penned his thoughts regularly. Clearly, he could easily be seen using and enjoying something like a fountain pen. And so he was paid by Conklin to endorse their Crescent pen. And he was quoted as saying, "I prefer it to 10 other fountain pens because it carries its filler in its own stomach, and I cannot mislay it, even by art or intention. Also, I prefer it because it is a profanity saver. It cannot roll off the desk." Yeah, his endorsements were used for over a century. To this day, you can buy a Conklin fountain pen with Mark Twain's signature and endorsement. So clearly, that influencer campaign was a success for Conklin, no matter the cost. But what about you? How do you determine whether your influencer marketing is a success? Well, due to the density of icebergs, it is not uncommon for large slabs of ice to just float through the ocean with nothing but a small portion visible above the water. Yet the rest of the iceberg is huge. Influencer marketing is exactly the same way. There are things that we can measure: reach, clicks, leads, sales. What we cannot measure is how many people were introduced to a brand or product and decide to purchase weeks, maybe months later. We also cannot measure how people's perceptions change, hopefully positively, as a result of the association with and the information provided by the influencer. Simply put, this is brand awareness. The more people who know about and are talking about your brand, the more likely they are to purchase from you when the need arises. It's impossible to measure well. Yet, when influencer marketing is executed well, you will see an impact on the most important business metric of all, your bottom line. So, this was influencer marketing from a B2B perspective with a little bit of a B2C in there. We can certainly talk about any questions you have about anything that I just said. I'm happy to get into specific details from your brand, your business. I'm also happy to talk from the influencer side. If there's someone here who wants to be an influencer or work like as a contractor or an agency with influencers, as he mentioned, I've been doing this for a long time. Over a decade, I started my blog, The Social Media Hat, and so I've been blessed to become an influencer in the digital marketing space. So what questions do you have?
I have questions. So we're in real estate, and hi.
Hi.
Thank you for the presentation. It was very insightful. We're from Netherlands, Suriname, and one of our core businesses is having multiple agents, and the realtor business is a heavily influencer marketing type of business. I've been noticing it's really hard to get people out of their shell, especially when you thought doing real estate does not at all include influencer marketing. So I want to know, how can I inspire them to become more active on social media? Because when buying a house, you need to influence people. Why do you need to buy my house or rent a house or whatever? So yeah, I've been struggling a little bit with that, for them to be more active, put themselves out there. I mean, it's a challenge, right?
Yeah.
You have to go outside of your comfort zone. So I want to know if you have any tips on that.
Yeah, and there's a lot that I'm going to share that I think will apply to a lot of different industries, because partly what you're talking about is how do you get buy-in, right? You're talking about from the influencer perspective. How do I get more people to buy into being influencers and participating in the conversation? Whereas you also have kind of a similar conversation. How do I get my boss to buy into influencer marketing? And then there's this idea that some people might make for really, really good influencers, but either due to lack of experience or perception, they're maybe not sure how they should do about it. They're not comfortable. And I can personally relate to that, because I am an introvert. I am not comfortable speaking. I am not comfortable being outgoing, but I'm able to like overcome it through training and experience, right? I can sit here, obviously, not panicking. So a lot of that's experience, a lot of that's training. So one of the approaches that I would first take with you is to, if possible, and again, this is for everybody in the room, is there anybody else existing today who is an influencer in that space? Okay, so there isn't anybody. So you might look at outside the industry, because what we want to do is have a model to turn to and say, this is the kind of influencer we'd like to develop. And then what you're going to want to do is find some individuals that are willing to at least work with you and begin to develop their influencer status. And I was just having a conversation last week at an event in St. Louis. The same conversation, different industry, same problem. They were a local company. They were a local sign company. They make big commercial signs for businesses. And there was somebody that they wanted to work with zero influencer experience. But there were things about their personality that they saw that they wanted to nurture and explore. So that becomes an opportunity for them. Now, one of the things I recommended right away was don't lean on just one person, because if they pack up and move, well, then you've wasted your time. So try to build this multiple person program where you've got different individuals that you're working with. It will take time, but if you're looking at other influencers in other industries who at least are exhibiting the same kinds of professional campaigns, style, voice, the activities that they're doing, you can at least first educate yourself. Okay, this is the kind of influencer we're looking for. They're not a movie star, they're a builder, or they're a craftsperson, or they're an educator, whatever that is. Maybe they're, talking about local events and news. Whatever that person looks like, identify what that is, have that all documented. Just write down notes and begin to document and think through what are the actual campaigns that they might work with, and how do they go about carrying themselves? Are they writers? Are they video? Are they podcasters? Are they a mix? Hopefully they're a mix, because one of the biggest roadblocks to most people is going on video. Even though, and you're going to hear me talk about tomorrow morning, this is one of the most effective ways to reach and influence people, other than being in a room like this and being able to have this conversation, right? Since we can't do that every day, all day, video's the next best thing. So the same is true for marketing. So if you can get influencers to create video, that's the pinnacle. But it doesn't have to be only video. And if you can give potential influencers the option of video or audio or written, if you can give them the option of, hey, we would love for you to create video, but you don't have to be in the video, right? If I wanted to be a table influencer, because that's a thing, right? I could take video of the table, and I could show the different ways I'm using the table, and where I got the table, and how I decorated the table. I can show all that without even being in the video, right? And for some people, that's an out, as we say, right? That's a way for them to get out of the burden psychologically of having to be in the video itself. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. My name is Rajiv from Aptastic. I have a question that is a bit related to Jean-Luc's earlier comment in his keynote about superfans.
Yeah.
And in what way does having superfans for your brand, and I'm looking at this from a B2B perspective, in what way does having superfans for your brand and building a community for your brand relate to this ambassador type of program? Is it the next step? And to follow up on examples, looking at Apple, there are a lot of super fans for Apple products and communities around that. So how is this the next step, and how would one in a B2B industry go that direction?
Yeah. Well, I have an entire keynote presentation tomorrow morning, so we're gonna get into this in a big deal, which I love. So that's awesome. And yes, because that is the next step. That's exactly why I told Jean-Luc, let me do a workshop on influencer marketing on day one, and get at least some of you really ready and excited for tomorrow morning, because tomorrow morning is how do we build community. Now, Doreen talked great about community today, but when I'm talking about community, I'm talking about it in a much broader sense, like you're talking about, right? How do we develop fans, where it doesn't matter what platform they're on, doesn't matter what platform we're on. We have this community of fans that spans whatever region, state, country, continent, globe. And they're ambassadors for the brand. They are super fans. So this is like Doreen said, a concept that Pat Flynn talked about. He's going to be keynoting my next summit in December. And the idea is these are individuals who are customers. Okay, they're paying probably customers, maybe they've got complimentary service, but they're customers of your brand or products. And they love you so much. They're way beyond just simple fanhood. And you know that they're a super fan because without even being asked, they will talk about your brand. I didn't ask Doreen to talk about me or Agorapulse from the stage today. I didn't ask her for that. I didn't pay her for that. She did that because she loves the brand. That's a perfect example of the kind of brand ambassadors that I develop personally around the world. People who are speaking at events like this. I was at an event in a small town in Ohio, but it's really popular. There were about 400 people, just like this event. Very similar focus. It's a 2-day event, mostly a single stage of speakers. And the first day, virtually every single speaker on that stage talked about Agorapulse in one way or another. And I wasn't paying any of them to do that. But it's because we built the relationships with them. I was literally hired by Agorapulse 4 years ago because of the relationships I have in the industry. They wanted somebody who was singularly focused on building relationships. And we're B2B. You know, Agorapulse is not B2C in the slightest bit. So what you want to do is have this mindset where, okay, we're going to have influencers. We're going to do influencer marketing. We might have an affiliate program. We might have a channel partner program of some kind. And we're going to be on the lookout for the people that really love us, that really identify with us, that have that same style, that brand fit, right? And then we're going to nurture that relationship. I give my actual ambassadors hoodies, sweatshirts that nobody else can get. And some of you will be like, hoodie, okay. I'm not even a hoodie guy myself. But most of them, that's one of the articles of clothing that they cherish. When they wear it out of the house, they take selfies in the Agorapulse hoodie, and of course they share it to social media. And then when they're asked, hey, where'd you get that hoodie? Where can I get a hoodie like that? They're like, you can't. You've got to be an ambassador. So they've built up that exclusivity, that FOMO that Doreen mentioned. I literally get messages from other people in the industry. Like, hey, Mike, you sent me a hoodie. You sent me a hoodie. I'm like, well, got to be an ambassador. So that's some of the relationship building that you can do, and you can foster that. And you don't need a lot of those people, right? For most other brands, where this would play out is in normal Facebook groups, like literal groups and communities, like Doreen was talking about before, where if somebody asks a question, who do I go to for this, whatever this is? And this is you. This is your brand. This is your key product or service. You want people in that community that say, oh, you got to go to him or her or that company. That's where you got to go. That's what I've spent the last 4 years fostering for Agorapulse. If you are in a community that is just all about social media marketing in general, and somebody asks the question, hey, what tool should I use to schedule social media posts? You'll see my ambassadors and other friends of the brand commenting over and over again, Agorapulse, Agorapulse, Agorapulse. And then they'll happily explain why, because they're not paid to do that. They just enjoy using the tool. It helps to have a really good product or service. That should be a given, right? You gotta deliver, right? You gotta give them something to be raving fans about. You gotta take care of them. You gotta recognize that when we mess up, and we all mess up, when we mess up, we gotta fix it. And again, I'll be transparent. At Agorapulse, we messed up 4 months ago. We messed up big time. Who here has heard of TikTok? Number one social network, number one search engine, number one downloaded app in 2021. That is the biggest platform in the world. In May, I saw that they were coming out with an API, an application programming interface, which is what allows an app to communicate with other platforms. And I told my team, hey, TikTok's coming out with an API, we better pay attention. And they didn't listen to me. So in August of this year, all of our competitors at the same time, on the same day, with a press release from TikTok, announced that they were all supporting TikTok, not us. My head of product was probably this close to being fired that day. And he's like employee number 8 from the company. So that would have been a big deal. We're finally releasing TikTok next month. So we'll have it, and we're making a big deal, and we're trying to help our customers, and we genuinely feel bad. Anybody that stayed with us over the past 4 months, when they could have gone to a competitor that had TikTok, yeah, we owe them, right? Yeah, so we're trying to make them as happy as we can. We're not doing just publishing like most of the competitors. We're doing reports and listening and the whole thing. So we'll have that. So did that answer your question? Okay. I know I rambled a little bit there. Yeah.
Right. Actually, my question is somewhat answered because it is actually related to her. You were explaining that as an influencer, what we generally see, there is a face to it, and we follow that. We kind of see that person as the influencer, as a role model or someone we like to follow. But as you say, because that was my situation too, the burden of having a face in front of the camera and you're not really good at that, or you're conscious. Can you still be an influencer without having a face to it?
Yes. It will be more challenging. And the question is, can we still be an influencer even if we don't want to show our face? and I get it. I was very hesitant to be on video when I started my blog. I started my blog, the social media had in 2011. And this was at least 2 years before I was on video, and that was still early on. So video wasn't as popular, but still, I was hesitant to do that. It is possible to be an influencer. You can be a blogger, you can be a social media influencer and just be posting with the community. It'll be harder. It might take you longer to achieve the same success as somebody else in that industry who's going on camera. And this is because when you are seeing me right now, you can hear my tone of voice, you can see my body language, right? You can see my facial expressions. And so I'm communicating to you 80%, 90% more than I would be if I was just writing. Because and believe me, this hurts me to say that because I love to write. I am a blogger. If I haven't written in 3 weeks, I'm starting to twitch a little bit. I love to write, but I have to recognize the truth, which is that as human beings, we communicate far more non-verbally and far more through tone and facial expression. And so much of that is just throwbacks to our history. I'm sitting in front of you and I'm not standing like this the whole time. Anybody know why? Because this is potentially threatening to you. You don't know what I'm holding in my hand. And a Cro-Magnon might think I'd have a weapon in my hand. This is more engaging, more interesting, and so, trained speakers will not be all like this with their hands, but be calming and gentle and even do very specific things with their hands because we know that this will invoke certain responses, intended responses, and I just can't do that with the written word. So the other advice I would give someone like you, or myself even as a younger person, is let's think of ways that we can be on video that kind of gets around some of our discomfort. And the easiest example I can give you is to be interviewed by somebody else. That's how I started interviewing, how I started in video. I went and looked, this is back in the Google Plus days, there were live video shows on Google Plus every single week, and I started paying attention to who was doing live video shows. Now it's Facebook Live and YouTube Live and LinkedIn Live. But I paid attention to who was doing live shows, and I started off by just being an attendee in the comments, leaving smart comments, talking to the host. And as I did that, I raised my personal awareness with them, and then I got asked to be on their shows. I got asked to be on their panel. And as an interviewee, it's typically easier, at least in my experience, right? Somebody else is in charge of the show. Somebody else is hosting. Somebody else is coming up with the questions and having to think. And all you have to do is answer questions. Yeah, and sometimes all you have to do is look at them and not necessarily at a camera, if it's like this, where it's a live environment. And if it's at home, then you just gotta kind of look at their face on your screen and kind of ignore the fact that there's a camera pointing at you. So hopefully that helps a little bit. I think we have just a couple more minutes if there's any other questions. Anything else? Cool. Well, like I said, tomorrow morning we're going to be talking about community quite a bit. And I hope you enjoy that session tomorrow. That'll be the keynote in the main session tomorrow morning. So thank you very much.